The stomach is a jelly-shaped organ that receives the bolus from the esophagus. The stomach has many functions. Because a meal can be eaten much more quickly than the intestine can digest and absorb it, one of the functions of the stomach is to serve as a mixing chamber and a holding reservoir. The stomach also secretes gastric juice, which contains hydrochloric acid, pepsin, intrinsic factor, and gastric lipids. It also secretes gastrin into the blood. Gastrin is a digestive hormone that stimulates the gastric glands. Besides, the stomach also aids in chemical and mechanical digestion. Now I will talk about the anatomy of the stomach. A short lesser curvature forms the medial surface of the stomach, while a long greater curvature forms the lateral surface of the stomach. We divide the stomach into four main regions. The first region is the cardia. The cardia surrounds the opening of the esophagus into the stomach. The cardia contains abundant mucous glands. Their secretions coat the connection with the esophagus and help to protect the tube from the acid and enzymes of the stomach. The second region of the stomach is called the fundus. The area of the stomach between the fundus and the curve of the jaw is called the body. The body acts as a mixing tank for the ingested food and secretions produced in the stomach. For your information, gastric glands in the fundus and body secrete most of the acid and enzymes involved in the gastric digestion. The fourth region of the stomach is called the pylorus. The pylorus is divided into a pyloric antrum, which is connected to the body, and a pyloric canal which empties into the duodenum. A muscular pyloric sphincter regulates the release of chyme into the duodenum. When the stomach is empty, the mucosa lies in large folds which are called rugae.
Now we are going to look at the histology of the stomach. The stomach walls are modified for its specific function. As we can see in the musculary external, apart from circular layer and the longitudinal layer, which are also available in other alimentary canal in the stomach, there is also an oblique layer which will help the stomach to mix and crunch the food, physically to break the food down into smaller fragments. On the right hand side, we can see that the microscopic view of the gastric glands. Now we are going to look at the specific cells available in the gastric glands. First is the mucosa neck cells, which are located along the gastric glands and function to produce mucus. The second one is the enteroendocrine cells, which are located at the bottom part of the gastric glands, and it functions to release variety of hormones and hormone-like products which help in the digestion of the food. The next two cells are the parental cell and the chief cells. These two cells are located very near to each other in the gastric glands. Chief cells will produce the pepsinogen, which is the inactive form of the pepsin, whereas parental cell will secrete hydrochloric acid, which will make the stomach acidic. The acidic condition in the stomach is very essential to allow the conversion of pepsinogen into pepsin. The parental cell also secretes an intrinsic factor, which is a glycoprotein, which are required for the absorption of vitamin B12 in the small intestine.
Gastric activity can be regulated by three ways. The first one by the central nervous system, by reflex of the enteric nervous system, and the third by hormones of the digestive tract, intestinal phase. Gastric control process in three overlapping phases. Cephalic phase begins when you see, smell, taste, or think of food. Neural output proceeds by way of the parasympathetic division. The vagus nerve innervate the submucosal plexus. Postganglionic parasympathetic fibers innervate mucous cells, chief cells, parental cells, and G cells. In response to stimulation, the production of gastric juice speed up. Gastric phase, arrival of food in the stomach. The distension of the stomach, increase in the pH, and the presence of undigested materials are the stimuli which leads to neural response, local response, and hormonal response. Local response begins when distension of the gastric wall stimulates the release of histamine in the lamina propria, which binds to receptors on the parental cells and stimulates acid secretion. Neural response, stimulation of stretch receptors and chemoreceptors, which trigger short reflex coordinated in the submucosal and myenteric plexus. This activates the stomach secretory cells. The stimulation of the myenteric plexus produces powerful contraction in the muscularis externa. Hormonal response, neural stimulation and presence of peptide and amino acids stimulate the secretion of the hormone gastrin. The gastrin travels into parietal and sheath cells, increase the secretions, and stimulates gastric motility. Intestinal phase. It begins when chyme first enter the small intestine. Dural response is the distinction of the duodenum by chyme stimulates stretch receptors and chemoreceptors that trigger the enterogastric reflex. This reflex inhibits both gastrin production and gastric contraction. Hormonal response, lipids and carbohydrates stimulates the secretion of cholecytokinin and gastric inhibitory peptide. A drop in pH below 4.5 also stimulates the secretion of secretin and the partially digested protein. The duodenum stimulates G cells that secrete gastrin.
Next, I'm going to talk about digestion and absorption in the stomach. The first one is digestion of proteins by pepsin. As the stomach contents become more fluid and the pH approaches 2.0, then the pepsin activity will increase. Next is the digestion of carbohydrates by salivary amylase and also lingual lipase. Furthermore, although the digestion takes place in the stomach but the nutrients are not absorbed, this is because epithelial cells are covered by alkaline mucus, which will cause it not directly to be exposed to the chyme and also lack of specialized transport mechanism. It is also due to gastric lining become impermeable to water, and the digestion is not completed by the time chyme leaves the stomach. Furthermore, there are two types of drugs which are absorbed in the stomach, which is the ethyl alcohol and also aspirin. Ethyl alcohol can penetrate the lipid membranes. Alcohol is then absorbed in the stomach before the nutrients can reach the bloodstream. The nutrients is referred to the nutrients in the meal. If the amount of fat in a meal increases, then the rate of alcohol absorption decreases. This is because alcohol is a lipid-soluble compound or molecule. It will dissolve in the fat droplets in the chyme. Next is the aspirin. Aspirin will enter the bloodstream across gastric mucosa. It will alter the properties of the mucus layer, which will promote the epithelial damage by stomach acid and also enzyme. Prolonged use of aspirin will lead to gastric bleeding. So, aspirin should be avoided in individuals with stomach ulcer.